It's me, Eli. Duh. Well, first things first. As some of you noticed, I forgot to include my usual fuck Caleb in my last post. I didn't even notice until after I shared it, but by then I was too bothered to change it. That's right. The idea of cursing my least favorite person in the world wasn't even important enough to edit my post. If that's not a sign that my mental health is improving, I don't know what is. Although, to be fair, I have bigger issues to worry about. Like Tristan, for one. After my conversation with him, all I can say is that my mental health made its comeback just in time. If I'd had the same talk with him months ago, before Zoe, I would have had a nervous breakdown. You'll see what I mean when I tell you about it. Which I guess means it's time to tell you about it. So, Tristan said he'd give me info about the elevator if he could talk to me. Just me. Specifically, he said, "Fine, I'll tell you, on one condition. I want to talk to you, Eli. Alone." And that's where I left off. When he said that, Zoe immediately jumped up and said, "Oh, hell no. You two would tear each other apart without me in the room." Tristan acted like he hadn't even heard her. He never broke eye contact with me. I said nothing right away either, since I refused to look away first and let him win our staring contest. But after a minute, I said, "It's okay. I'll talk to him." Still never looked away, though. I was trying my hardest to read whatever emotion was buried deep in his eyes, and miserably failing. His eyes may be the same color as Nolan's, but the resemblance ends there. Tristan's seemed dark and secretive, nothing like the humor and fun I always saw when I looked at my best friend. Zoe scoffed. But after another minute or so of our silent staring, she seemed to realize we were 100% serious. She sighed and knelt beside us, so we had no choice but to see her directly in our peripheral vision. First she looked at me and said, "Don't be an idiot. Control your temper. He's not worth it." Seemingly uncaring that Tristan heard her opinion of him. I think she disliked him enough by now that she probably didn't care. Then she looked at Tristan, and her voice became low and threatening. "As for you," she said, "don't even think about trying anything. If you hurt Eli, I'll kill you faster than you can rearrange your face into that stupid constipated glare you keep giving him. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just try it and see what happens." I bit my lip to keep from laughing at the constipated comment, because me bursting into giggles would ruin the intense staring contest Tristan and I both refused to end. But I did say, I'd listen to her. She's not exaggerating. Tristan smirked, the asshole. "Well, I believe her," he said. Zoe still shot him a glare as she stood up, but she seemed a bit more at ease. "Eli, I'll be right outside. If he gives you any trouble, just pound on the door. I'll either hear it or feel it, because I'm literally going to be sitting right here with my back against this door, holding my axe." "Wouldn't have it any other way," I said. So Zoe left, not looking particularly pleased, but at least satisfied enough to trust me alone with him. As soon as the door had shut behind her, I pulled out one of my pistols and laid it on my thigh, pointing towards Tristan. Mr. Bailey also settled beside me, paws tucked under him and fur brushing my leg. He was looking right at Tristan, eyes narrowed, but he made no noise. That was probably a good sign, since he usually meowed in the presence of a monster or immediate danger. And now, a full fucking 5 minutes after it had started, our stare-down finally ended. I would like it noted that I am not the one who looked away first. Tristan broke the intense eye contact by leaning back and laughing. I felt both victorious and annoyed, because who did he think he was to laugh right now? He knew Zoe and I were on edge. Rude. "Relax, I'm not going to try to kill you or something," he said, gesturing at the gun. "I'm not stupid. I know Zoe would murder me the second I tried to walk out that door. And if I somehow made it past her, her guard monster would tear me to pieces. And I'd like to live long enough to find my brother, so hurting you just wouldn't be worth it." "Wow, thanks," I said, hoping the sarcasm came through loud and clear. "I really appreciate that your only reason for not murdering me is your concern for your own life." He rolled his eyes. "I wouldn't kill you anyway. I may not like you, but I've never murdered a person. Why would I start now?" I considered this for a moment, and decided he was probably telling the truth. Because while he is an asshole, I don't think he's a cold-blooded killer. He's just the regular garden variety kind of asshole, not the kind that goes to jail for federal crimes. I'm pretty sure. Plus, Mr. Bailey was still quiet, simply watching Tristan intently, so for now, I felt okay. "Great," I said, "but if that's true, why the hell is your one condition talking to me alone?" Now he smirked again, and even though I knew my life wasn't in immediate danger, my heart still sank, because I could tell that smirk didn't mean anything good. "I saw your face while you were listening to my story," he said. "I saw how much it was hurting you. And I know it can't be because you cared about my parents that much. It was more than that. Something that cut a lot deeper. It was obvious." I stayed silent. There was no way this was going anywhere positive. "You've mentioned your family before," he continued, that awful smirk still on his face. "It wasn't hard to put two and two together. Me talking about my family was making you remember seeing the death of yours. And it was clearly hurting you to do so." My heart was beating faster. I swear I could feel the cold metal of the pistol through my pants, and the rush of air through my windpipe. The whole world seemed more intense. "Of course it hurts," I said. "And?" He settled back in the chair and smiled, although there was no friendliness in that smile. "Well, tell me about it," he said. "All the details. Tell me everything. How they died, what you saw, how red the walls were. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to relive that pain, I'll know you're serious about finding this elevator. I'll be honest, I was mad. Mad that he was using my trauma against me as leverage, mad that he was so nonchalant about my family's deaths. So you want me to suffer to what? Earn the location of the elevator? That's right, he said, his voice lilting as if he were singing. He was clearly enjoying this. If you're willing to suffer, I'll tell you what I know. I glared at him, hoping it was as solid a death glare, TM, as he routinely gave me. And you promise that you're not just stringing me along? You actually remember where you saw the elevator? He shrugged. Guess you'll have to find out, won't you? Mr. Bailey hissed, but it wasn't one of his warning noises, just a pissed off one. I put a hand on his fur and instantly felt a little better. It was oddly comforting to know that he was pissed off on my behalf. Fine, I said, because what choice did I have? We needed to know about that elevator, and though he was toying with me, I was 90% sure he did know where it was. He was just being a dick about it because he could. And somehow the idea of reliving that first day didn't sound as terrible as it once did. Sure, I didn't want to, but I felt like I could face it without having a breakdown, which is a huge improvement, because even thinking about the possibility of reliving it would have sent me spiraling a few months ago. Hell, even 1 month ago, probably. So, shout out to Zoe for improving my mental health. I started talking, and I told Tristan all about watching my family die, and about rule number 1. Yes, the infamous, as yet unmentioned rule number 1. You may be disappointed because it's nothing spectacular. Probably nothing compared to what you've built up in your heads. But it is one that's important to me, and one that I've tried my best to follow. I won't recount our entire conversation here, because I honestly don't remember everything perfectly. It's kind of a blur. But I will recount the same story I told Tristan. If I got through it once, I can get through it again. Not to mention that I'd rather share it with all of you than with that asshole. So if he knows, you all deserve to. Well, here we go. Without further ado, may I present rule number 1, and the story of my family's deaths. I would say enjoy, but I really don't think you should be enjoying hearing about the murders of everyone I loved. Don't be a sick motherfucker like Tristan. Anyway, when this all started, I wasn't home. It was late Saturday morning. Like Tristan mentioned, I was planning to hang out with Nolan later that afternoon, but in the morning I was working an early shift at Chick-fil-A. Before you ask, yes, they have some interesting policies for workers, and no, I don't agree with all their philosophies. I needed a part-time job during my gap year, though, partially to save up some money, and partially because my mom told me I better find a way to occupy myself if I was taking a gap year, and Chick-fil-A was the place that offered me a job. Plus, they do have damn good chicken. So I worked several shifts there a week, and I volunteered as a coach for a kids' basketball team in a local youth league. Not a bad way to spend a year. Well, until that day. There I was, nearing the end of my shift, and thank God, because I'm not kidding when I say a lot of people come to Chick-fil-A breakfast on Saturday mornings. But suddenly I heard a scream from outside. I looked at my coworker, her name was Jen, and said, "Did you hear that?" Her eyes were wide, and she didn't even get a chance to reply before a woman staggered up to our front window, leaving a bloody handprint on the glass as she slid to the ground, either unconscious or dead. I won't lie. I thought that she had been shot and a dispute gone wrong, or maybe that she was on drugs or something. I don't know. But it was a pretty safe part of the city, so I was concerned, but I thought it was a single incident. Jen was already picking up the phone to call emergency services when another woman ran up to the front of the shop. This one sidestepped the first woman on the ground and sprinted through our door. She had a gash on her forehead and her skirt was torn. She was panting heavily, her eyes wild. "Monsters," she choked out. "Don't know what, where, here now, so much death, help, monsters!" Jen screamed at me, "I can't get through, the line is busy," and desperately started dialing again. There was nothing I could do there, so I turned to the hysterical woman to try to, I don't know, comfort her or get her to clarify what she meant because she was making zero sense. But it was too late. The words died on my lips. Out on the street, I saw my first glances of monsters running past. Flashes of teeth, claws, tails. I couldn't tell you what monsters they were if I tried. It happened so fast that my brain was still struggling to process any of what I was seeing. I also witnessed my first monster killings from behind that cash register. I watched in horror as the fast-moving, inhuman creatures sliced open humans attempting to flee. "Quick, back here!" I called to the woman, but I don't think she heard me, because at that moment a monster ran through the big front window full force, sending glass shards everywhere, and jumped on the woman in the same fluid movement. I'm pretty sure it was a Caleb, but don't quote me on that. The details of those first few moments are real fuzzy. I ducked down behind the counter out of instinct, glass shards, and heard her screams and its howls as it killed her. Jen had frozen where she stood over by the dining area. I could see her from my place beneath the counter. I tried gesturing for her to come over, but she didn't even notice. She just stood there, frozen in fear, and it leapt onto her next. The phone clattered to the floor. People in the dining area were scrabbling to escape as the monster devoured Jen. I hope some of them made it. All I know is that I crawled on my hands and knees through the swinging door and into the kitchen in the back. The 3 cooks on staff that morning were huddled together in the small office, clustered around the little radio in there. The stovetops and grills were still on. I could smell the chicken burning. But that was forgotten, because suddenly a fire was no longer a large concern, comparatively. I got to my feet and went to stand behind them. On the radio, someone was giving a panicked news update about the city being locked down and monsters appearing everywhere, seemingly out of thin air. And that's when my family occurred to me. Cold dread filled my body like ice had been dumped in my veins. I hadn't even had time to consider that this was happening anywhere besides this one street, but if it was, my family was in serious danger. It was Saturday morning. My parents and siblings would all be at home, probably having brunch or whatever, watching some show or getting ready to go out later in the case of my sister. And they never put the news on, which means they'd have no idea what was happening until it happened to them. Oh shit, I said out loud, my heart feeling like it might explode, and then I was out of there, sprinting out the back kitchen door, because I had to get to my family to warn them, to save them. I didn't know why this was happening, or even what was happening, really, but I knew for damn sure that I didn't want what had just happened to Jen to happen to my family. Chick-fil-A wasn't far from my house. I walked there every day, 10 blocks or so. I ran faster than I have in my whole life, I think, but it still felt like an eternity. Looking back, I don't know how I didn't get killed on the way, because I passed monsters killing people everywhere. A mix of common sense and luck saved me, I suspect. Whenever a monster turned in my direction, I'd duck down or hide around the corner. When someone asked me to take her hand, I completely ignored her because I was in such a rush. When I passed a deli with a big table of food out front, I didn't even give it a second thought, because free samples were the last thing on my mind. So yeah, knowing what I know now, I'm goddamn lucky I was panicked enough to be focused, but not so panicked to totally tune out of my surroundings. I could have been killed by an MJ, or an Ashley, or a Caleb, or a Brent, all in the time it took me to make it from Chick-fil-A to my house. For the first few months, I sometimes wished I had been killed then, because then I wouldn't have had to see my family die. And if they died, why did I deserve to live? But eventually I realized that was dumb, and me dying then wouldn't have helped anybody. I turned onto my street, and only a few feet ahead my neighbor was having his organs ripped out by a Brent, although I didn't have a name for them then. There was blood everywhere I looked. On fences, splattered across car windshields, pooling in the street. A fair number of monsters, too, and already plenty of people dead or dying in grotesque ways. There was no way I could navigate this minefield and survive. My house was another 3 down. Fuck, I cursed quietly as I spun on my heel and ran for my neighbor's backyard. They had a tiny yard enclosed by a short fence. It was easy to make it over the fence, cross the yard, and jump the fence into the next yard in like 20 seconds. Not because I've had practice coming home after curfew and sneaking back into my house by jumping over my own fence or anything. Obviously, I would never do that. I did this for the next few houses, too, and then I was in my yard. The back door was closed, which I expected, but I knew it wouldn't be locked. We often left it unlocked while we were home, since 1, my mom liked to garden, and 2, either me or Justin would be in and out at some point, mowing the lawn or taking out the trash or doing something else tasked to us by our parents. So I sprinted up to it, adrenaline pumping, heart racing, and ripped the door open. I was crossing the threshold so fast that I banged my shin on the still swinging door, but I barely even noticed, because what I'd entered into was terrible. The front door was gone, smashed into pieces on the floor. The front windows all had been shattered. All of our living room furniture and kitchen furniture had been upended or broken. But of course none of that was the worst part. The worst part was the trail of blood leading up the stairs, and the noises I could hear from up there. Screams and roars and crashes. It sounded like my family were fighting for their lives. I frantically looked around for a weapon of some kind. The closest possibility was a broken chair leg, which kind of resembled a wooden stake now. I grabbed it and sprinted up the stairs, praying I wasn't too late and that they were all still breathing. Well, they were still breathing, but I was too late. Turns out those two things weren't one and the same. The blood splatters led to my parents' room, the door of which was also ripped off its hinges and laying in the hallway. I leapt over and was greeted with the sight of all 4 of my family members in various states of injury, fighting several monsters. Amber was in the bathroom. I could see her reflection in the mirror from here as she slashed at Caleb with a kitchen knife. Justin was on the bed, swinging a baseball bat at a Brent. Did I mention Justin played baseball? He was really good. My mom was at the edge of the closet, using our broom to make stabs at the same Brent from behind. And my dad had a fucking sword and was basically fencing a second Brent. Yes, we have a sword in the house. My granddad was in the Navy, and he got a sword when he commissioned. My dad always kept it safely under the bed, wrapped up carefully. Until now. It's supposed to be purely for ornamental and ceremonial purposes, but I guess it still functions as a working sword, too. And my dad was wielding it like a champion. As soon as I entered, Justin noticed me and yelled, "Eli!" I only distracted him for a second, but a second was enough. The Brent lunged forward and tore into his chest. I could only watch in horror as Justin crumpled under the pillows and the Brent followed, ripping out his organs and throwing them onto the blankets. My mom screamed, "No!" and ran forward with the broom. It all happened so fast. I tried to follow, but there was nothing I could do. The Brent was too quick. It didn't even turn around. It simply glanced sideways, saw her coming, and reached out its scorpion tail to stab her. It pierced right through her abdomen, all the way through so that it came out her back. I still ran forward, hoping somehow that if I could get her free, it wouldn't be too late to save her. The Brent seemed to oblige. It pulled the tail back out, satisfied, and went back to snacking on my brother's liver. My mom fell to the floor, coughing blood and with a gaping hole in her stomach. I sank to my knees beside her. Mom, no, oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry, I choked out, crying. I dropped the chair leg and tried to press both my hands over the hole, even though I knew somewhere in the back of my mind that it was hopeless. I can get you out of here, it's gonna be okay, Mom. It wasn't okay. Even if I could somehow fix the wound itself, the tail was venomous. Not only was my mom now stiffening as the venom paralyzed her, but she'd gotten 100 times the dose of a simple sting. She couldn't even say anything back. Her eyes moved and met mine. She was looking right at me when she died. I don't know if it was the injury or the venom stopping her heart that actually killed her, but either way, there was nothing I could do but look back into her eyes and cry as the life left them. I was still kneeling there in shock, feeling numb, when my dad called my name. I could see the pain on his face from here. I knew that not only was he fighting through injury, but that he was fully aware of what had just happened to my mom. I'd never seen the level of sorrow I saw then in his expression, but there was a hell of a lot of determination, too. I think he was broken, but was forcing himself to shelve it because he still had 2 kids fighting for their lives who needed him, and he wasn't losing his entire family without a fight. "Eli!" he called again. "I've got this one! Help your sister!" He snapped me out of it. I had to stay strong, for my dad and for Amber, who I could still save, and for my mom and Justin, who would want us to survive even if they didn't. I picked up the chair leg and ran for the bathroom, where Amber had been cornered in the bathtub. I didn't make it, though. The Brent devouring Justin had apparently had its fill, because it roared and leapt off the bed, blocking my path. Now keep in mind that this was the monster that had just killed half my family, and it was now trying to stop me from saving the other half, so I was seeing red. And not only literally from all the blood, I mean figuratively. Give me a break. I screamed something totally wordless and incoherent, and launched the stake at it like I was throwing a javelin. It hit the Brent in the chest and pierced right through. This was oddly satisfying, given what it had just done to my mom. The Brent howled, stumbled, and then raced out of the room, breaking the door frame even more in the process. I don't think I killed it, because I heard it shatter another window downstairs as it left, but I at least heard it enough to cause it to flee, and that felt like a pretty solid victory. I also think the only reason that really worked was because I caught it by surprise. It wasn't expecting a rage-induced javelin-style attack. But hey, I'm not complaining. We were down to 2 monsters, and suddenly I felt a little less hopeless. I didn't have a weapon anymore, though. Trying my hardest not to look at Justin's mutilated body, I reached across the pillow and grabbed his baseball bat from where it had fallen. It was slick with his blood, and my stomach churned at the smell, but I'd have to manage. This time I made it to the bathroom. Amber was pretty beat up, losing steam, and I could tell she was fading. Luckily, the Caleb hadn't noticed me yet. I climbed up onto the bathroom counter. Right as the Caleb lunged forward for another attack, I leapt off the counter, and as I flew through the air, brought the bat down as hard as I could on the Caleb's skull. There was a crack, and it screeched, collapsing to the floor. It started to get back to its feet. I hadn't killed it, so I raised the bat to swing again. I didn't make it. The Caleb reached up and scratched across my stomach from the floor. I gasped in pain and doubled over as blood soaked through my shirt from the long gashes. The Caleb got to its feet, and somehow I found the strength to swing again this time. I hit it square in the neck, and it screeched again as some kind of thick purple liquid began to leak out, and the Caleb scrabbled away, fleeing. Before you ask, no, I didn't kill any monsters that day. My first kill was the Caleb in the pet shop a day later when I was with Mr. Bailey. But yes, the monsters I wounded badly fled. The reason monsters never flee in my more recent adventures is that I figured out how to kill them, and since then it's always been my policy to kill them, no mercy. But the monsters would flee if I wounded them badly enough, I think. Or maybe they wouldn't by this point, since they've gotten more aggressive in general. Who knows? I don't intend to stop going for lethal hits just to find out. I turned back to Amber, feeling victorious, but my heart sank when I saw her. I had been half a second too late. The Caleb had got her on its last lunge. She was sprawled in the bathtub, her leg at a weird angle, and blood coming from so many different injuries I couldn't even tell which had been the last one. She gave me a weak smile and said, "Thanks, Eli," blood pooling at the corners of her lips. And then her head slumped, and she was gone. And all that was left was her blood against the porcelain, spiraling down the drain. If any Caleb deserves a fuck Caleb out of all the Calebs I've dealt with, it's that one, for killing my sister. Not counting original Caleb, obviously. So fuck that Caleb. At this point I was numb. Despair was threatening to crash over me, but I could hear my dad still fighting behind me, and somehow the adrenaline kept my breakdown at bay. I had to help my dad. Still gripping the baseball bat, which now also had purple ooze on it, I raced back out into the bedroom. My dad was still going, but his slashes with the sword were getting weaker. Suddenly I heard roars coming from the backyard, and a second later one of the windows behind my dad shattered as another Brent stuck its paw through it. And then the other window shattered, and another Brent appeared, shoving its shoulders through the broken glass and pulling itself into the room. They must have heard the battle. My dad was surrounded. 3 Brents. They weren't paying me much attention yet. I think they were going for the easier target first. And they do like to work as a herd. I was going to try to take them, even though it was hopeless with just a bloody baseball bat and it injured me. But my dad yelled, "Go, Eli! Go hide! I'll distract them!" I hesitated. My dad swung at the second Brent, and the original Brent took that opportunity to tear at his chest. Blood spattered against the wall. My dad glanced at me between the Brents, and for a split second we made eye contact. I swear I could see the determination in his gaze. the determination that he would die to save his son. And he yelled again, "Go!" So I did. I heard his moans as they tore into him behind me. I saw a glimpse of his intestines being ripped out before I turned. I wasn't prepared to run out into the streets full of more monsters, so I ran into my bedroom, and I crawled into the back of the closet and buried myself under dirty laundry, hoping the monsters wouldn't be able to see or smell me there. I don't know exactly how long I stayed there. It was at least a few hours, because it was late afternoon by the time I crawled out. It had been quiet for a while, but I wasn't risking it. Plus, I was too busy shaking and crying and reliving the horrors I had just witnessed to even consider going back out anyway. But finally I did. I went back and walked through my parents' bedroom, and I cried again at the sight of my family's bodies, even though I thought I couldn't possibly have any more tears left. I made myself take it in. Justin's half-eaten organs splayed across the bed, Amber's broken body in the bathtub, my mom's glassy eyes, my dad's decimated corpse. He was even worse than Justin. They'd destroyed him. And the sword that my dad had taken such careful care of for so long was laying next to him, snapped in two. There was so much blood. On the mirrors, on the walls, on the furniture. The whole room was red. My mom would have hated it. She always wanted to repaint their room blue. I sat there in the middle of the room and told them all I was sorry, that it was my fault for not being here and not being able to save them, that it wasn't fair that I had lived and they hadn't. And I told them through tears how much I loved them and would always love them, because I hadn't gotten a chance to tell them before they died. And perhaps I felt guiltiest of all about that. So that's how we arrive at rule number 1. Rule number 1. If you care about somebody and death seems imminent, tell them you love them. You'll regret it forever if you don't. It may not be exciting, but it sure as hell rings true. I can't tell you how much I regret every day not getting to tell my family I loved them. And sure, you can make the argument that they knew, but it's not the same. You may have noticed that I often tell Mr. Bailey I love him when I think I'm about to die. That's because of rule number 1. You may also have noticed that I tried to tell Zoe, but that one's harder, because we haven't actually said those words yet. But next time we're about to die, because God knows there will be a next time, I'm gonna try again to do it. If she gave me the strength to tell this story, I can find the goddamn strength to tell her I love her. Because I think I do. Love her, I mean. Damn, it feels good to get that off my chest. I'm glad she doesn't read these, at least as far as I know. I couldn't forgive myself if we died before she knew that. Anyway, that's the story of how my family died. I packed my duffel after that, and that night I went to the pet store, and you know what happened then. I think I'll type out Tristan's response later. I need a break. I promise I'll tell you how Tristan reacted and whatnot, but recounting the whole story of the first day has been draining. So I'm gonna go hug Zoe and cuddle Mr. Bailey, because I love them, and because I've learned how important it is to cherish the people and animals you love. You never know when it might be the last time you get to.